one lesson you taught me. Never drink from the dead.
Louis! Put me in my coffin. Put me in my coffin.
I'll put you in your coffin!
Through conversations with Neil, and part of the conversations we had when I was in Dublin, and going through, how the sequence could work, was the concept of that literally all of his life would drain away, that he would shrivel and come down to that of the look of almost a corpse, almost of an Auschwitz victim, someone dying possibly of AIDS, where their life has been drained away from them. Key to this working as an effect would be the performance of Lestat dying. And key to this effect working was that although, what people don't realize is that once Lestat is on the ground and his throat is cut and he is literally dying and that camera is pushing in, it is no longer a Tom Cruise in this movie. At that point, it's a robot.
And that was going to be the big shot, But it ended up being fairly seamless, and no one really noticed it all that much, like we had hoped they would, and because it was just too subtle. Which is the way we liked it. Neil and I started to develop this sort of thing of that any effect that would actually be in there should not really be noticed outwardly. It might be a subliminal thing, you might catch it, you might not. And we started to attack all the other scenes that way, that everything that you saw there was actually very, very simple looking, even though it might be very complex to do.
He loved the ideas that we were dealing with. He loved the fact that we'd be dealing with effects that actually would be almost invisible, And oddly enough, kind of guaranteed he wouldn't be nominated because people wouldn't notice them. They wouldn't know what was effect or what was design, that kind of thing, but he actually loved the subtlety of what we were doing.
Neil's request for what they would look like, and in his mind was that that feeling of a burned log that is turned to ash, that it's holding itself together, that still has its shape, but if you were to touch it, it would crumble, was the feeling that he wanted from these two ash bodies. And so the first step was to create that visual element. What do these two characters look like burned up? All in one shape before they've fallen apart. And that became a sculpture. It became this incredibly amazing ashen sculpture. That's the first step, always the first step. The art is the first step. The art always wins. We never go to the technology before we take care of the art.
We took Stan's design and then we cut it apart in a bunch of different pieces, wired it all together, with motion control, and just basically start pulling the wires so that the arm would fall off and the hand would fall off and this would go in a very specific pattern, added a bunch of 50 elements of dust and things breaking apart. And when you look at it, it looks kind of like what you'd imagine if you touched something that was all basically burned to a crisp, like an ash on a cigarette. It would just fall apart that way. And we spent a long time, like a month or 2 months working solid on the shot to try to make it look like you didn't do anything, you just built it, like Stan built it. Basically, Neil wanted something for the Santiago character to do, and we were in a tunnel in Paris, and he said, I want him to dance on the ceiling of the tunnel. And it's like, well, there's only really one way of doing it. There's a couple little tricks you can do now that wasn't done in the 40s. The Fred Astaire trick is you build a steel cage with a set built inside of it, and the camera and the steel cage revolve, and it's basically a giant revolving rotisserie, essentially, and then you film inside it. And the real trick is the actor or the dancers. Anyway, Fred Astaire did it so well is that he could dance and hide the feeling that the gravity is now shifting seamlessly, so you couldn't tell when it actually turned. And that's what Stephen Ray had to do, who's not necessarily a dancer, and we had a choreographer do it. And it was one of the last things we shot, I think, on the movie, is Brad Pitt coming over and we made the shot look like you were shooting over his shoulder, who's standing upright while he's dancing on the ceiling background, so we had to shoot them separately. And that was the last bit, and Neil saw the take he liked, which was take 23, if I remember correctly. And that was the end of it. It was like one day, you know, do the Fred Astaire gag, and, you know, do it hopefully as seamlessly as that was done.
In my death scene, I mean, where I have my torso cut, Brad Pitt cuts me from here to here. So this little bit of me is lying on the floor, sort of grunting. And I had to stick my head and part of my arm through this hole in the floor. And Stan Winston said, "Don't worry, you won't be there for very long. It'll be uncomfortable, but you won't be there for very long." And I said, "How long?" He said, "Oh, an hour." I thought, "An hour? That's really a long time to be uncomfortable, you know." And but it's worth it, and just for that moment in the film, and it's only a moment.